I never thought the man I once trusted with my whole heart, the father of my child, would look me in the eye and say something so cold, so final, that it would shatter every piece of the life we built together. He walked into our home like any other day. No warning, no emotion. Just a sharp glare and those words that still echo in my head. When I return from work, I do not want to see you or your puny brat here anymore. I stood there, holding my baby boy, my arms trembling, but not from fear. From rage, from heartbreak, from betrayal so deep it burned. I should have cried. I should have begged. But instead, I smirked. Not because I was okay, but because that was the moment I knew. He just started a war he was not ready for. And I was going to finish it. What happened next would uncover a trail of lies, hidden identities, and secrets darker than anything I could have imagined. He thought I would leave quietly, but I had other plans. You are not ready for this story, but it is time you hear it. My name is Evelyn Hart. I am 28 years old, and for the past 4 years, I have been married to a man I once thought was my forever. His name is Marcus Hart, 32, successful, charming, and, to the outside world, an absolute catch. We lived in a cozy 2-story house in Charlotte, North Carolina. White picket fence, a maple tree out front, and neighbors who waved with smiles that never quite reached their eyes. On the inside, however, our picture-perfect life had started to crack. I had given birth to our son, Caleb, only 6 months ago. He was the light of my life. His tiny hands, the way he smiled when I sang to him, the warmth of his little body curled against mine, it was all worth the sleepless nights and aching back. But for Marcus, the birth of our child was the beginning of his retreat. He had started working later hours, ignoring my messages, and coming home with that scent, faint but unmistakable, of a perfume that I did not own. I knew something was wrong, but I had no idea it would blow up the way it did. One Thursday evening, just as the sky outside turned a bruised purple and the wind picked up that early autumn chill, Marcus came home. His face was stone. He did not kiss my cheek, did not look at Caleb. He just dropped his keys into the bowl by the door, looked straight at me, and said the words that turned my blood cold. When I return from work, I do not want to see you or your puny brat here anymore. I froze. My arms tightened around Caleb, who squirmed and let out a soft cry. Marcus was already walking past me, heading upstairs as if he had just commented on the weather. He did not even flinch. I stood there for a moment, shocked. Then, something inside me shifted. I no longer felt sadness, not even fear, just a deep, cold fury. I smirked. All right then, I thought to myself, you asked for it. You see, Marcus did not know everything about me. He never truly cared to learn. He saw me as the quiet girl who dropped out of college to marry him, who stayed home and raised his son, who kept the house spotless and smiled in every family photo. But what he forgot was that before I met him, I was not just someone's wife. I was someone. I was smart, resourceful, and now, furious. I waited until he left for work the next morning. He kissed Caleb on the forehead with fake affection, muttered something about being late for a meeting, and slammed the front door shut. I watched his car pull out of the driveway and disappear down the street. Then I turned and walked to the bedroom. It was time to start executing the plan I never thought I would need. I went to the closet and pulled down the showbox from the top shelf. Inside were all the documents Marcus thought I had thrown away. Bank statements, credit card records, property deeds, password hints I had pieced together over the years. Even screenshots I had taken from his burner phone that I found hidden in the garage last month. Messages to a woman named Alina, pictures, voice notes, and one particularly explicit video I had never watched fully. He was careless. That was his mistake. Mine was staying silent for too long. I called my sister Mia, who lived 2 hours away in Raleigh. I had not told her everything before, not wanting to seem weak. But now I laid it all out. Mia was furious. You and Caleb are coming here. Today, do not argue. She was 10 years older than me, a lawyer, and had the kind of sharp tongue that could slice a man's ego in half without lifting a finger. I packed only essentials. Some clothes, baby formula, Caleb's favorite toy giraffe, and the box. I locked the front door, slipped the key into the mailbox slot, and left the neighborhood behind without looking back. Marcus had no idea what was coming. By the time he returned from work that evening to find the house empty, I had already filed for emergency custody of Caleb, using the evidence of his emotional neglect and infidelity as leverage. With Mia's help, we had also frozen the joint bank account legally, of course. Marcus would have access to exactly $34.17 until the courts ruled otherwise. But the real twist? I had scheduled a meeting with his boss, a discreet, private conversation that Marcus would never see coming. You see, his company had a strict morality clause. Affairs with clients or employees could result in immediate termination, especially if they were proven to be a pattern. Marcus had not just crossed the line, he had practically built a house on the other side of it. And Alina? She was not just his mistress. She was his client's daughter. I met with her father that Monday. I brought pictures, transcripts, proof of how long it had been going on. He was not just shocked, he was livid. I trusted that man with my company's future, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. He brought this girl into meetings. I thought she was just tagging along. Evelyn, you have done the right thing coming to me. I thanked him and walked out of the building with Caleb strapped to my chest, feeling lighter than I had in months. Marcus called that night, 12 times. I did not pick up. When I finally answered the next morning, he sounded frantic. Evelyn, where are you? Why is our account frozen? What did you do? I said nothing at first, just listened to the panic in his voice. Then, calmly, I said, you told me you did not want to see me or my puny brat. I am giving you exactly what you asked for. And I hung up. But that was just the beginning. The next few days were strange, quiet, but tense. I stayed at Mia's place, surrounded by her firm, clear-headed energy and the calming routine she had built over years of living alone. Caleb adjusted surprisingly fast, as if even at 6 months old, he understood we were finally safe. Meanwhile, Marcus spiraled. He began sending long, guilt-laced texts that reeked of desperation and confusion. One message read, "You took everything from me. The house, the money. Caleb, why are you doing this?" It almost made me laugh. He had tossed us away like we were disposable, and now he could not handle being discarded in return. But I was not done. Mia helped me secure a private investigator. Not because I wanted more proof, what I already had was enough for a courtroom, but because I had a gut feeling that there was more beneath the surface. And I was right. Within 72 hours, the pie returned with photos, videos, and a timeline that made my skin crawl. Marcus had not just been cheating with Alina. There were at least 3 other women, all of whom overlapped. One worked under him. Another lived in an apartment he paid for. The third was even more shocking. It was his secretary's daughter, barely 20. I felt sick, and yet some part of me felt vindicated. This was no longer just about infidelity. This was a man living double, no, triple, lives, lying with such ease it was almost inhuman. And each woman thought she was the only one. I had the pie reach out to the others, privately. They deserved to know the truth. I did not do it to be cruel. I did it because they, like me, were victims of the same illusion. But Marcus did not take the unraveling quietly. Late one evening, as I rocked Caleb to sleep in the spare bedroom at Mia's house, I heard shouting outside. My heart clenched when I recognized his voice. Evelyn, I know you are in there. You cannot keep my son from me. Mia was already dialing 911. I could see her standing at the window, eyes calm but jaw clenched. She did not panic easily, but I could tell she was furious. When the police arrived, Marcus tried to charm them. Said he was just trying to talk to his wife. But when they ran his name, something came up. An open complaint from one of the women, filed just 2 days earlier. Alleged coercion. Text messages that hinted at manipulation, and with my evidence on file, they took him in. It was not an arrest, but it was a very public, humiliating detainment. The next day, Mia received a call from a lawyer named Rebecca who claimed to be representing Marcus. She requested a peaceful meeting to discuss custody and asset division. I agreed. We met in a quiet legal office downtown. Marcus sat across from me, looking smaller than I remembered. His eyes were sunken. His suit, once tailored and crisp, looked wrinkled. His hands fidgeted with the ring I had returned weeks ago. I made mistakes, he began. I stared at him without blinking. I want to fix this. I want to be a father to Caleb. Let us find a way to co-parent. For a moment, I almost believed the sadness in his voice. But then Rebecca slid a proposal across the table that nearly made me laugh. He wanted shared custody, half of everything, even tried to argue that I had kidnapped Caleb and destroyed his life. I slid a flash drive across the table in return. On it were the voice notes, the photos, the texts from 4 women, and a 2-minute voicemail where he ranted to a friend about how he never wanted a kid anyway. Rebecca listened to part of it and looked mortified. "I think we are done here," I said, standing. "You will hear from my lawyer." But what I did not expect happened 2 weeks later. I was at the park with Caleb when a woman approached me hesitantly. She had dark circles under her eyes and held a manila folder in shaking hands. "You do not know me," she said, "but I am Alina's sister." I froze. "She is in the hospital," she continued. "Overdose. They found out about all of it, your husband, the other women, the lies. She was pregnant. She thought he would leave you for her." My breath caught in my throat. She handed me the folder and walked away before I could speak. Inside were letters, from Alina to Marcus, some full of love, others full of threats, promises, desperation. She had been clinging to a fantasy while he played her like a game. I stood in that park, holding my baby in one arm and those letters in the other, feeling something break inside me again. But this time, it was not pain. It was clarity. This was no longer about revenge. It was about protection. I had to ensure that Caleb would never grow up around a man like Marcus, that he would never absorb the poison that had once trickled into our lives. But to do that, I needed one final move. One that would bury Marcus's chances in court permanently. I needed to talk to his mother. She had never liked me, thought I was too quiet, too bookish, not lively enough for her golden boy. But what she did not know was what her son had really become. I packed everything, the flash drive, the letters, the investigator's report, and I knocked on her door. What happened inside that house? That changed everything. I had only met Loretta, Marcus's mother, 5 times during our entire relationship. Each visit had been stiff, cold, and quietly judgmental. She had always treated me like I was barely qualified to fold her son's laundry, let alone raise his child. She believed Marcus was perfect, her darling boy, a successful man who could do no wrong. That illusion was about to shatter. When she opened the door, she looked confused at first, then suspicious. "Evelyn?" "I need 10 minutes, I said. "Then I will leave, and you can go back to pretending I was never here." She stepped aside reluctantly. The house smelled like antique furniture and floral air freshener, just like I remembered. She sat down on her pristine ivory couch and crossed her arms. I sat across from her, opened the folder, and placed the flash drive and letters gently on the glass coffee table between us. "I thought you should know what kind of man your son really is," she scoffed. "Let me guess, you want sympathy?" "No," I replied calmly. "I want you to stop defending a man who used women like disposable napkins. And I want you to understand that this is about more than a bad marriage." I walked her through it, every message, every lie. The voicemail where he called Caleb a mistake, the apartment he paid for in secret, Alina's overdose, her pregnancy, the young secretary's daughter, the client's betrayal. The job Marcus had already been quietly let go from just days ago. Loretta's face drained of color. She tried to interrupt at first, but her voice weakened with every new detail. "You are lying," she whispered, more to herself than me. "I wish I was," I said softly. "But you raised him. Maybe you saw it and chose to look away." When I left, she did not follow me to the door. I had barely made it back to Mia's house when my phone buzzed. It was Loretta. Her message was short. "Do what you have to do. You have my full support." The next morning, Mia forwarded me an email. It was from Loretta, addressed to the family court judge. She detailed a history of manipulation Marcus had displayed as a teenager. The time he lied about a scholarship, the incident with a former girlfriend he ghosted after promising to propose. She admitted she had buried it all, ashamed. And now, seeing the consequences as a grandmother, she refused to stay silent. It was more than I expected. That email shifted the tide. The court ordered Marcus to attend psychological evaluations, and a temporary restraining order was granted. He was barred from seeing Caleb until further review. But just when I thought things were finally turning in our favor, I received a letter that rattled me to my core. It was anonymous. No return address. Inside was a single photo, Caleb, asleep in his stroller, taken from a distance. On the back, scribbled in shaky pen, "Children should not grow up hating their fathers." I stared at that image for hours. My heart thudded against my ribs like a war drum. It was recent, taken in the last week, and whoever sent it had been watching us. I called the police immediately. They filed a report but warned me that with no clear evidence, their hands were tied for now. I asked Mia to install extra cameras, change the locks, and set up emergency alerts on our phones. That night, Caleb cried for hours. I could not settle him down. Maybe he felt my fear. Or maybe he sensed that something bigger was coming. And it was. 2 days later, Marcus disappeared. His lawyer tried to contact him. The PI could not trace his phone. He had not shown up for court-ordered appointments. His car was found abandoned near Lake Norman, keys still in the ignition, and the doors unlocked. At first, I thought it was a trick. Some ploy to gain sympathy, to make me look like the hysterical ex-wife chasing a missing man while he played victim. But then something more sinister dawned on me. What if Marcus knew the end was coming? What if he planned to burn everything down before losing control? Mia checked security footage at the house. Nothing, but the neighbor's doorbell cam picked up a car slowly circling the block that morning. It was not Marcus's car. It was a white sedan with tinted windows and no plates. It passed 3 times, then vanished. That night, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said answer it. I did not speak. At first, silence. Then a voice. Raspy, distorted, like it was coming through a cheap voice changer. "You think you have won, but you forgot one thing." My breath caught in my throat. "Some debts never die, Evelyn, and you just inherited his." Click. I stood frozen, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Mia called the police again. They took the call seriously this time, especially given the custody case, the stalking, and Marcus's sudden disappearance. But I knew deep down, this was not over. I had tried to protect my son from a monster. I had exposed the rot hiding beneath Marcus's perfect image. But in doing so, I had unearthed something darker, something he had been running from all along. And now it was coming for me. The police began taking things more seriously after the threatening call. They assigned a patrol car to do random drive-bys near Mia's house. I started double-checking the locks every night. Caleb slept beside me now. I needed to feel his breath against my arm just to sleep. Days passed, then a week, and still no word from Marcus. It was like he had been erased from the map. His bank accounts were frozen. His passport had not been used. His credit cards went silent. Some began to believe he was dead. But I did not. I could feel him watching. Not physically, emotionally, like some invisible thread still tied us together, taut and dangerous. And then, another envelope arrived. No stamp, just tucked under Mia's porch mat. Inside was a copy of Caleb's birth certificate. Certain details had been highlighted. My full name, Caleb's date of birth, Marcus's name as the father. And one line had been violently blacked out, so hard that the paper was torn through. The line marked, "Father's social security number." Underneath it, in blocky handwriting, "He is not who you think he is." I stared at that line for hours. I knew Marcus had secrets, but this was different. It was not about cheating anymore. It was about identity. About the life he had constructed around me, around our son. I asked the PI to dig deeper, deeper than employment, deeper than bank statements. I gave him Marcus's birth records, old school photos, even the yearbook pages from his high school. And what he came back with blew everything apart. Marcus Bennett did not exist before the age of 21. No driver's license records. No college transcripts. No family medical history. The man I had married was using a new identity. The PI found a lead buried in a closed case file from another state, Colorado. It detailed a young man named Jonathan Marks who had gone missing after being accused of embezzlement and falsifying government IDs. He was suspected of running a complex fraud scheme with 2 others. The case had gone cold. The file included an aged-up composite of what Jonathan might look like today. It was Marcus. I nearly dropped the phone when the PI showed me. He had faked his entire life. His name, his business, even his college degrees. He had scammed not just me, but dozens of people. I started connecting the dots. The shady clients, the business trips that never made sense, the random large deposits. It was all fake, all part of the illusion. I went straight to the police with everything. They opened an investigation into Marcus, now possibly Jonathan. Federal authorities were looped in. Suddenly, I was not just a single mother fighting for custody. I was the former wife of a fugitive fraudster whose past was catching up with him. But the danger did not go away. One night, as I returned home with groceries, I noticed the back gate slightly open. I froze. Mia was out of town for a wedding. I was alone with Caleb. I clutched him tighter and stepped back, then called the police. They arrived quickly. Guns drawn. They searched the property. Nothing was taken. Nothing broken. But above Caleb's crib, scrawled in red marker, were the words, "He belongs to me." My knees buckled. I felt like I could not breathe. This was no longer Marcus trying to manipulate me. This was a man unraveling, or someone else entirely stepping into the madness he left behind. That same night, the police uncovered a storage unit registered under an alias tied to Marcus. Inside were bags of cash, several IDs, burner phones, and, most disturbingly, photos. Dozens of them. Of me. From over the years. Me leaving the gym, me pushing a stroller, me outside Mia's house. Some from months ago. Some from when I was still pregnant. They had been watching me for longer than I knew. But the twist that knocked the wind out of me came from an officer who examined one particular photo carefully. It showed me on the steps of a courthouse, holding a folder. Caleb was in my arms. But in the far background, nearly out of frame, stood a man. He was wearing a hat, sunglasses, but the officer froze the image and enhanced it. It was not Marcus. It was someone else entirely. Someone who looked just like him, but 10 years older. The same jawline. The same eyes, a scar on the neck that Marcus did not have. The PI pulled up the embezzlement file again. Jonathan Marks had a brother, and he had vanished the same year. The realization hit me like a train. What if Marcus had not been working alone? What if someone had helped him vanish, or worse, taken his place? I did not know if Marcus was alive, dead, or hiding, but I knew one thing. I was being hunted by a man I could not identify, for reasons I did not yet understand. And Caleb, my innocent baby boy, was in the center of it all. It was no longer just about a broken marriage. It was about surviving the storm of lies, deception, and a past Marcus had tried to bury, but which was now rising like a wave to drown us all. I packed our things that night, took the car, disappeared. No phone, no social media. I left the investigators with everything and told them they would hear from me once we were safe. Because if I stayed, I knew what would happen next. He would come. And this time, he would not knock. I drove through the night with Caleb wrapped tightly in a blanket beside me. I kept the radio off. Every time headlights appeared behind me, I checked the mirror until they turned away. We crossed 2 state lines. I switched motels twice. I used cash only. No phones, no cards, no patterns. I contacted a woman named Grace, a retired journalist Mia knew. She owed Mia a favor and agreed to meet in a small cafe at the edge of a coastal town no one paid attention to. Grace had once worked on identity fraud exposes and had more experience with false names and missing persons than any police department. I showed her everything: the photos, the storage unit content, the threatening letters, the anonymous man in the background, and the federal report on Jonathan Marks. She sat silent for a long time, reading through it all. Then she looked up and said something that made my stomach turn. What if Marcus was not the mastermind? What if he was the pawn? I blinked, confused. She laid out a theory, chilling in its logic. Jonathan Marks had a brother, yes, but what if there had been a third man? One who worked in intelligence. One who had access to the tools needed to wipe and rebuild identities. Someone who wanted out and used Marcus as the shell. According to Grace, in 2012, a mid-level CIA subcontractor went missing after an internal fraud probe. He vanished without a trace. His name, Charles Benton. Files on him were sealed under national interest, which meant there was something worth hiding. Grace believed Charles had helped Jonathan Marks vanish, and then faked his own death, taking on a new identity too. She pointed to one small clue no one else had noticed: the photo from the courthouse. The man in the background had a tiny symbol on his watch. the emblem of a now defunct defense contractor that Charles had once worked with. This man, this possible Charles, had been watching me, not just Marcus. And now Marcus was missing. Which begged the question, had Charles silenced him? Or was Marcus working for him all along? I left Grace stunned and terrified, but determined. Her advice was simple: if you want to survive, go completely off-grid. I found a women's protection group that helped victims of extreme domestic fraud cases. They helped me obtain new documentation under emergency laws, new IDs, new name, new start. Caleb became Nathan. I became Ella. We were relocated to a new town. I was given part-time work under the table. A small apartment under a lease in someone else's name. We started over. For 3 months, it was silent. No letters, no strange men, no calls in the night. Caleb learned to say "mama" again. He smiled more. I began to think, maybe we were finally free. Until one day, a small box arrived at my door. No return address. Plain brown cardboard. Inside was a single item. A pacifier. Caleb's old one. The one he had lost months ago at Mia's. And under it, a note written in chilling clarity. He does not belong to you. You are just the caretaker. You have 30 days. My hands trembled. I contacted the protection group. They moved us again, this time to a safe house in the mountains. More cameras. More silence. But my fear grew louder every night. I kept a journal of everything, what I saw, what I suspected. I left a copy with Grace and another with the FBI liaison who had picked up Marcus's case after the fraud reports. I told them if anything happened to me, they were to release it. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. Until one morning, I received an encrypted email from the FBI. Marcus's body had been found in an abandoned cabin in rural Colorado. He had been dead for at least 4 months. That meant he was dead even before the photo was taken. Even before the first call I had received. The man calling me, following me, threatening me, had never been Marcus. And then I understood. It had always been Charles. He had taken over where Marcus ended. Maybe he was trying to clean up. Maybe he was trying to claim Caleb. Maybe something else entirely. But that was the final twist. Marcus had been the curtain. Charles had been the puppeteer. And I, Evelyn, or Ella, or whoever I was now, I was the mother of a child caught in the middle of something older, darker, and far more dangerous than a broken marriage. I left everything behind. Moved once more. No phone. No trace. I changed our names again. Caleb will never know the truth, not until he is old enough to protect himself from it. But sometimes I see the same shadow across the street for a second too long. Or hear the same cough behind me in a store, too familiar to ignore. I do not know if Charles is alive, but I know he is out there. And he still thinks Caleb is his. Let him try. Because this time, I am not running. I am ready. And if he comes again, I will not just survive. I will end it. So, what do you do when the man you married turns out to be a lie? When love was nothing more than a mask hiding something far more dangerous? This was not just a story about heartbreak. It was a story about power, fear, identity, and how far a mother will go when someone threatens her child. If this story gave you chills, hit that subscribe button right now because more gripping stories like this are coming. True pain, true strength, and twists you'll never see coming. And do not forget to like, share, and comment below. What would you do if you found out your partner had faked their entire life?